DeMeco Ryans, head coach of the Houston Texans, is at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, which is underway right now. DeMeco was asked about Stefon Diggs and his future with the Houston Texans. He is a free agent coming off of that knee injury that he suffered midway through last year. Here is what DeMeco had to say about Stefon Diggs.
And we loved having Steph on our team. We'll see how things work out with him. Steph, he brought, you talk about energy, you talk about leadership, he brought a lot to our team. So it hurt us down the stretch not having Steph, not having Tank. You need those playmakers, especially at the wide receiver position. Right? It just enhances your ability to be able to move the football down the field, score points. So that is an area of emphasis for us, is looking at the wide receiver.
So that video courtesy of Aaron Wilson of Channel 2. He's got a YouTube channel. You should subscribe to that if you want to get all the Texans sound you possibly can and hear straight from the players and the coaches. DeMeco spoke about Stefon in the past tense there. That's the way to go about it. The only way that Stefon Diggs should come back to the Texans is if he takes a team-friendly deal that's borderline disrespectful. And would Diggs want to do that? I don't know. Maybe he really liked working with C.J. Stroud. Did seem like he got along with Tank Dell, with Nico Collins, and the Texans wide receiver room. And he did have an impact last year. Did he have the kind of impact that people were expecting? No. Will he still be the same player after suffering a knee injury? I'm skeptical about that. Never want to write a guy off, but Diggs has been in the league for a very long time. Diggs and Cooper Kupp are two wide receivers that, for Diggs, I'm offering very little to in free agency. And for Cooper Kupp, I am waiting to see if the Rams cut him. I don't think that the Texans should be bending over backwards, doing risky things like trading for wide receivers when last year, that Stefon Diggs trade is a failure, even if it's a failure with extenuating circumstances that weren't Nick Caserio and the Texans' fault. You got him for 8 games on a 1-year contract. He is now a free agent. Did he get you any further than you got the year before? You had a more respectable outing against the Chiefs than you did against the Ravens in the second round of the playoffs. But you still lost, and Diggs wasn't there, and now he's not here next year. So maybe you get a compensatory pick if Diggs goes elsewhere, and I am curious as to how aggressive the Texans are in free agency, given how aggressive they were last year. But the second part from DeMeco Ryans that you heard right there is that wide receiver is a position that they are looking at, both in free agency and in the draft, and they should. They should. But also it is on C.J. Stroud and Nick Caley, new offensive coordinator, to raise the level of play of all the Texans wide receivers. They should be able to get more out of less. Jorge Garcia says neither Kupp or Diggs excite me. They're toast. David Tovar says he's done with Diggs. Give me Deebo Samuel for a 6th round and restructured contract. 6th round pick ain't going to do it, I don't think. It might be more like a 4th, 3rd, something like that. But I think that trading for wide receivers like that are probably going to cost you closer to a 2nd, if not a 1st round pick. I think there will be a market for Deebo Samuel, just given how unique he is as a receiver. But as a receiver, there are certainly some things that he doesn't necessarily bring to the table. He's more of a get the ball in his hands kind of guy than he is someone you're trusting to run precise routes. So we'll see what happens on that front, but I really want the Texans to stay away from trading for a wide receiver. I know it's a tempting thing that a lot of people will discuss on social media, and I try not to roll my eyes when I see it because I feel like everyone just plays too much fantasy football and you see big names and you're like, fuck it, get that guy. Fuck it, get that guy. Rack up the credit card debt. Who cares about the draft picks going forward? But it would be nice to have a 2nd round pick this year because the Texans do need to figure out how to get more help on the offensive line, whether that would be trading that 2nd round pick for an offensive lineman or using that 2nd round pick on an offensive lineman. More from DeMeco Ryans. This is also with Aaron Wilson of Channel 2. Here he is talking about that offensive line, which, of course, is a big topic of discussion for the Texans going into the season.
We can continue to improve on the offensive line, as everyone knows. Like we had some miscues there. I think, hitting the reset button will allow us to, the guys we have, they played some good ball. It wasn't all bad. Everybody had some bad reps here and there. O-line, D-line, a lot of guys have bad reps, but collectively, I think we can do a better job of just everybody being on the same page, hearing one voice of how we're communicating to the offensive line. And I think that'll help the guys that we have right now.
He talks about communication on the offensive line. You know what would help as that one voice? If the quarterback, C.J. Stroud, was the one voice that's doing the majority of the communication on the offensive line, which is something that hasn't happened yet. If you read that expose that DJ Bien-Aimé put together, or if you've been paying attention to a lot of the voices that cover the Houston Texans, I know Big Sarge has been beating that drum for a little bit. Stroud was not calling plays at the line of scrimmage. His offensive line was calling out the mic and all those things that you see before a play. It's time for Stroud to take on more of a role on that front. So I think that'll help. But I am hoping that the Texans, if you're going to trade for anybody this offseason, trade for a veteran offensive lineman. It is such an uphill battle for any young offensive lineman coming into the league. It's really hard. You got limited offseason workouts. You can't go 100% physically with defensive linemen, even in training camp, really. It's just so hard to come into this league and succeed right away. Can you trade a mid-round draft pick for somebody who's maybe in a difficult contract situation? Now, you do have to remember that a lot of offensive linemen, if a team's willing to trade them, there's probably some doubt, some skepticism that they have about that offensive lineman. So something to keep in the back of your mind. But if the Texans are going to upgrade the offensive line in any way this offseason, I would hope that it's done with a veteran of some sort. Here is more from DeMeco Ryans talking about offensive linemen, courtesy of Aaron Wilson, Channel 2.
When is they needing to add to their room, or is it more so working with what you guys are?
Every year, for me, we're looking to add to every room. I think you have to continue to add and get younger, improve your depth at every position. So for me, every room needs a guy.
It's such a generic way of answering it. DeMeco basically says, yeah, we need everything. Okay. And you shouldn't go into a draft thinking to yourself, we got to draft guys at this position. You should not hamstring yourself. And I think that the Texans do deserve some credit for what they have done in the draft. I know people get mad about the Kenyon Green pick, but, I mean, have they not crushed just about every single defensive back pick? Derek Stingley a couple of years ago. He had the injury issues, but now he's one of the top corners in the NFL. This past draft, Kamari Lassiter, Kalen Bullock. I mean, Jesus. They have revamped this secondary quickly. And sure, there are still some guys in that secondary that you look at and you wonder about what's Jimmy Ward's status going forward. But, I mean, someone I didn't even mention along the way, Jalen Petrie, who's really good as a nickel player. They've done a great job of turning over the defensive backfield. Will Anderson's been awesome to open up. They have found a way to plug and play on the defensive line. They bring in Danielle Hunter. There's been a lot of things to compliment Nick Caserio for. Nico Collins is a third-round pick. Tank Dell's a third-round pick. It's a shame he's hurt, but Dell's giving you more than you'd ever expect out of a third-round pick at wide receiver. I have a lot of faith in Nick Caserio running the show, and it seems like he and DeMeco Ryans have a really good relationship. And DeMeco actually talked about that today at a press conference at the NFL Combine. Here is DeMeco Ryans.
Year 3 for myself and Nick working together, and it's been seamless. It's easy because we see football the same. We know the type of players that we want on our team. We know that mindset that we're looking for in players. It's guys who have that relentless mindset, guys who love football. Those guys jump out to us, right? Guys who are leaders, that jumps out to us. Those characteristics that they don't lose those when they come into the NFL. If guys were leaders at college, guys play with a certain play style and a demeanor in college, that's going to carry over to the NFL. So those are the type of players we look for, and we want good people.
They want good guys. I know that used to drive Texans fans mad. Good guys. We did a show a couple of days ago, and I was wondering who's going to be the next Houston Texans fall guy, say things don't go according to plan this coming season. And I know a lot of people look at Nick Caserio, but I don't know, man. The way that they talk about one another and the way that I've seen them interact with one another when they've been around each other, it really does feel like they have a really good partnership, to the point that I think that they'd want to stick around with one another. And say things hit the fan, maybe the Texans feel like they don't have a choice. Cal McNair, Hannah McNair think the writing is on the wall. We got to do something about this. But I don't think it's going to be Caserio as the next fall guy. I think he has done a really good job in a lot of ways. The offensive line's just been the big problem. I mean, the guy that they really overpaid for, with Bill O'Brien running the show, Laramie Tunsil, he's still around. Titus Howard might have been a reach at the first round. He's been solid for you, but has he ever been great? Was he worthy of that extension he got? Was Shaq Mason worthy of that extension before he had played a snap for you? Based off of last year, no. Juice Scruggs, is year 3 going to be the year? Kenyon Green, year 3 wasn't the year for him. I don't know if any year is going to be the year for Kenyon Green. Blake Fisher, did we like what we saw last year? I don't know. Like, that's what you look at with Nick Caserio, and you maybe have some questions about that. But it is hard to find offensive linemen anywhere. And the hope is that Bobby Slowick and Chris Strausser or Chris Broussarded, like, you're hoping they were the stupidest fucking coaches alive. And you hate to say it like that. Like, I hope those guys do well in their next stop. But that does seem to be the hope right now, because I don't know how you turn over the entire offensive line in one offseason. I think it really is about, well, if we get better coaches, these guys have the talent, they can figure it out. This is more from DeMeco Ryans talking about what kind of player the Houston Texans are looking for in the draft.
All right, and that's the thing that me and Nick agree on the most. You want to win, but you want to win with great people. And we both believe that you can do that, and we've shown that by some of the guys we drafted in CJ, Will, Kamari, Henry. It's just a lot of great people, and it's fun when you're working with great people who are talented and they're like-minded, and we're all reaching that same goal.
Hell yeah. I like to have good dudes around. I do like that the Texans generally don't have, Deshaun Watsons anymore. At least we believe for now. That they've stayed away from the Justin Tuckers of the world. It's nice. More from DeMeco Ryans. Hey, we were talking about Stefon Diggs a little bit ago. What's the latest on Tank Dell, who has had the absolute worst fucking luck when it comes to health over the course of the last year? Breaks a leg, gets shot, blows every single ligament in his knee. Here's DeMeco.
Yeah, Tank he's still going along through the process of recovering and healing. But he's in great spirits. That's the main thing about it.
I'd like to hear he's in better than great spirits. Maybe that's DeMeco being realistic and realizing it's going to be really tough for Tank Dell to come back from what he dealt with this past offseason and the way he got injured in that game against the Chiefs.
Tank, he's got a smile on his face while he's going through the rehab process, so he's headed there. In due time, he'll be back.
In due time, he'll be back. Well, I hope so. I really do. That's just the worst luck. And I feel bad for Jared Wayne, that receiver who was in there in that game and sees the ball up in the air. He's running downfield. He thinks it might be for him. He dives into Dell as Dell catches that touchdown pass. It's amazing Dell completed that catch, considering every fucking ligament in his knee collapsed under that. It's also crazy that the Texans scored in the games against the Chiefs 2 second-half touchdowns that would have tied the game, and then they missed the extra point right afterwards. Ka'imi Fairbairn had such a good year, and then just a couple of moments, you're like, what the fuck, man? You can hit every field goal from 50-plus yards with extra points. Not a lock? What's up with that? DeMeco Ryans was asked about offensive linemen also at the NFL Combine. You heard him talking with Aaron Wilson. Here he is speaking at the podium about offensive linemen and what the Texans are looking for.
Yeah, getting better protection for CJ is definitely a main point of emphasis for us. Right? We know, when CJ is protected, he has a clean pocket. Right? He's a pretty good quarterback. And I constantly show guys clips in our meeting after a game of plays when we protect well and we have a good pocket. I'll show guys explosive, outstanding throws CJ is able to make in the middle of the field, along the sideline. Like, he's capable of making any throw on the football field, but it's just a matter of protecting him and giving him that comfort when he's in the pocket. When we do that, we can move the ball, we can make plays. So that is a point of emphasis for us, of making sure he is protected better.
Yeah. I mean, we all know it. They're going to be looking at the offensive line in the draft. They're going to be looking at the offensive line in free agency. Jorge Garcia comments, I feel offensive line is very scheme dependent. We can sign and draft one that fits our scheme. Theoretically, but I think what's important to note, what Nick Caserio and Nick Haley and I think DeMeco indirectly have said this offseason, we're going to try to cater our team to what our players do best. And I hope that there is some sort of commonality among the offensive linemen that will allow Nick Caley to think of something that makes this offensive line gel together more than it did. There's some sort of identity he can build with it. Hey, how do we just do basic things like pick up stunts, which they couldn't do last year? How do we become more angry as a run blocking team? Because they really struggled on that front. More DeMeco Ryans talking about what he wants to see out of his offensive linemen.
When I look at offensive linemen, first and foremost, I'm looking at, pass protection. Like, how good is a guy in pass protection? And then, for everyone, for me, speaking, offensive linemen, I want to see that grit. I want to see that toughness, right, that nastiness of how guys are finishing their block.
He continued by saying what type of leaders these guys are, how passionate they are about football. That's very important to me when it comes to the offensive linemen. So we'll see if they're able to find guys that actually can, do those things. I think that's a rather vague way of describing offensive linemen. And honestly, if DeMeco had said, we just want guys who are fucking good, I think we well would have taken it. So that was DeMeco Ryans at the NFL Combine. I think Nick Caserio will speak tomorrow, and we all know Robo Caserio tends to stretch his words out. David Tovar is excited about Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Jaguars. I think he's mad about it, actually, reading the text a little bit further. Going to the Jaguars with our pick pisses me off. Imagine him with Nico, bro. Yes, of course. But this is the way that the draft goes. You're not going to be able to get everybody, and there's a chance that they wouldn't have taken Brian Thomas Jr. there. Think about it. You had going into this year Stefon Diggs and Tank Dell. Did you want to get Brian Thomas Jr. too? Like 4 wide receivers every play? Jorge Garcia says, I think we should draft the guy from Ohio State, Egbuka, in the first, and then trade and sign an offensive lineman. That might be the way they go. I think a lot of mock drafts are projecting that. I don't really pay a lot of attention to mock drafts because it's all hypothetical conversations. I feel like they're kind of a waste of effort and time. But I know a lot of people like the NFL draft, and I'm going to try going forward to stop poo-pooing everything that I don't really like.